This video is brought to you by RogueDeckBuilder.com. Purchase a playmat today and help us make the move to our new studio. We have over 10 playmats to choose from. Visit RogueDeckBuilder.com. Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com, here with our top 5 lists of cards that I'm glad are going to be rotating from standard. I guess you can consider this kind of like a top 10 list. But I have a few more cards than 10, and it's a top 5 because I'm breaking these down into 5 archetypes of cards that I'm glad are going to be rotating that I think have kept standard very stale for the past year, and I think will open up a lot of new options in the Konzatark here and the Theros blocks in standard for play. So without further ado, I think I'll just get into the list here. So coming in at number 5 are 2 cards that were just too... I guess there's 3 cards in this set of archetype that were just too oppressive. They were your very, very one-for-one utility. You get so much value out of them, and with a sort of strategy that then tries to get card advantage through either cards like Read the Bones or Unreal Connections, put you on top, or it just takes care of any sort of early strategy and goes over the top in a mid-range strategy, would be the black removal 2 spells. So we have Doomblade, we have Ultimate Price, and we have Abrupt Decay that I'm going to include in these lists. So number 5 is these 3 cards. Now, they really, between the 3 of these cards, they basically take care of everything in the format. The Ultimate Price can take care of any sort of monocolor creature. The Doomblade can take care of any non-black creature, and the Abrupt Decay can take care of any card 3 or less. So these cards really hurt cards like Corsair Crewfix, cards like Bramaz, cards even like Goblin Rabblemaster. It was very hard to have any sort of aggro strategy against a mono black devotion deck when they were just going to stabilize with either Blood Baron or Grey Merchant of Asphodel, or just plain go over the top of you with a Desecration Demon and be able to get rid of any sort of early strategy with Doomblade, Ultimate Price, Abrupt Decay. So I just think that these cards were a bit too powerful for standard. I'm liking standard now that you have cards like Utter End and Hero's Downfall and Banishing Light. Those are your early removal spells, and they all cost 3. There really isn't a good 2-drop removal spell, and this really opens it up for not only aggro decks, but also mid-range decks, because mid-range decks you couldn't really afford to be playing a 4-drop or a 5-drop that just gets taken care of by 2-mana instant spell, and then the army of Pack Rats, or then they just start a Desecration Demon, etc., 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 just begins to overwhelm you. So again, coming at number 5 is the removal package that Black had between Doomblade, Ultimate Price, and Abrupt Decay. All right, so on to our number 4 list is 2 cards that I absolutely love myself, but I don't like them in the exact same deck, especially with all of the addition of Stoke the Flames, and you still have Lightning Strike, you still have now Arrow Storm, is just the straight burn to the face card. So we have Warleader's Helix and Boros Charm. I think these 2 cards together really made a Boros burn deck over the top and not want to interact with your opponent. So again, the format was really spread into 3 decks. They were very hard to independently build a deck that was good against. There is Esper Control, there was Mono Black attrition-based decks, and then Boros Burn. And then you did have some more aggressive decks and devotion decks on top of that, that if you really wanted to side against those, it really was hard to have a deck that worked against the big 3. And what that did is it put you in kind of a rock, paper, scissors standard, which I don't really like rock, paper, scissors. I like to be able to use as much cards as possible. And people may complain about Thragtusk days during Return to Ravnica and Innistrad, but I had a lot of fun in those Return to Ravnica and Innistrad days because I still felt that the format was wide open. There wasn't really a Boogeyman deck. There was a Boogeyman card, but not really a Boogeyman deck, and I was able to brew some very successful brews that could easily deal with Thragtusk, either like the Bug of Moral Servitude that eventually I just get so much card draw, or Hell's Lookout that just goes completely through a Thragtusk, or just the other plethora of Reanimator decks and whatnot that I was able to do during that season, that I felt that I could easily play around Restoration Angel Thragtusk and still have a fighting chance. And I do believe that there were at least triple, maybe even quadruple the amount of playable decks during the Innistrad Return to Ravnica. And again, I think if you're going to go to a tournament, and there was basically the top 3 decks that I mentioned just barely, and then you had some fringe decks with like the Dredge deck And like Jund Planeswalker, I consider the exact same thing as Mono Black Devotion. They really play the same way. And all the other strategies like monsters had started been weeded out by the end of the season, and actually even midway through the seasons, monster decks were quite rare, and the Jund Planeswalker kind of took over there. So anywho, without Warleader's Helix and Boros Charm in the format, I think that people don't need to worry quite as much about burn. Right now we have a Jeskai aggro deck, but it is trying to utilize a lot of creatures. They do have Jeskai Charm that does 4 damage. They do have Aerostorm that does 5 damage, but I really don't think a 3-mana spell can replace a Boros Charm, and I really don't think a 5-mana spell can replace Warleader's Helix that did 4 damage and lifelink. So burn is not what it used to be. They lost a lot just with these 8 cards going out of their deck. So on to number 3, the third archetype of card that I'm glad is going to be rotating, and let's just get this out of the way, is going to be the super oppressive control cards in Sphinx's Revelation and Supreme Verdict. Now, Sphinx's Revelation just begged control players to play the most unfun, boring, long, stall decks where they just stalled, Sphinx's Revelation, stalled, Sphinx's Revelation, stalled, Sphinx's Revelation number 3, finally put down their Elspeth, finally put down their Aetherling, and win the game. Maybe some people like playing that sort of Magic the Gathering. I don't. The worst feeling is actually losing a tournament due to draws. So I talk about this story a lot when I went to a States when the Return to Ravnica was just released, and the flavor of the week there was UWR Miracles or Bant Miracles, where they just stalled using Sphinx's Revelation, and like Tameo, a lot of the decks Tameo was the win condition, so you really had to just stall out until Tameo ulted. And the deck, like, I ended up losing 0 matches at State. I was statistically eliminated due to draws. I was using a junk midrange deck, Thragtusk Restoration Angel, so yes, my deck was quite stall as well, but when you have, my deck could finish games in a timely manner. The Tameo decks, there were so many of those people who were statistically eliminated as well because they could not finish their opponent in the allotted time of the 50 minutes the round had. And so a bunch of people were just eliminated due to draws. And I've learned since then to actually scoop a lot sooner if I know a control deck is going to beat me, and then just try to go on to a game number 2 and hopefully game number 3. But sometimes you think that a tie is going to be better than a loss. I'm under the mindset that it's not, that a tie is just as bad as a loss in a bigger tournament where the cuts are quite aggressive. So any cards that really promote the stall and really plague the standard field with a lot of draws, I'm not a fan of. And that is Sphinx's Revelation. Now, Supreme Verdict is another can of worms. I absolutely hate this card with a passion because of the clause that it can't be countered. That takes away a lot of decks that could play a tempo type strategy. I really think that Green Blue Flash would have been a decent deck if Supreme Verdict did not exist. What happened with Supreme Verdict is it guarantees that you wipe the board. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it except for cards like the Rootborn Defenses, which was subpar at 3 mana. It's hard to keep open 3 mana to kind of counter the Supreme Verdict, and it just didn't fit in a lot of decks that I personally wanted to build, especially white. I preferred to build like a blue tempo over a white kind of mid-range bulky deck. So Supreme Verdict really hampered my abilities as a deck builder to create innovative and fun decks. So I'm so glad that Supreme Verdict is out of the way. Don't have to deal with this card. And this opens up a huge format. Like, my favorite deck going forward, MTG has a few, or MTG Goldfish already has a few hits on some standard decks that have been played. And there is a Heroic Tempo deck that has counterspells in the sideboard. I'm thinking specifically to counterspell the 5-mana sweeper and any other type of higher sweeper. Anger of Gods can be countered. Drown in Sorrow can be countered, and the new 5-mana, the double white 3 colorless sweeper can also be countered. So it opens up that entire archetype for blue-white heroics. It's definitely a deck that I'm going to mess around with. I'm already starting to build a Battlefield Thaumaturge Launch the Fleet deck, as I had some success with it, but again, it was just so bad against Golgari Charm, it was so bad against Supreme Verdict, that it kind of stopped me from even trying to brew with heroic-type cards. So now that blue-white heroic is wide open again, and it's because of Supreme Verdict it's gone, I am a very happy rogue. Alrighty, so the next list, and surprise, you might think this is number 1, but it's actually number 2. Number 2 is going to be a combination of cards that I absolutely despise because I still consider this to kind of losing me a plane ticket to a pro tour. I was able to top a pro tour with Jund Dredge in Las Vegas, and if I would have won the top eight, the first match, the semifinals, I guess it is, or quarterfinals, then I would have had two incredibly easy matchups in Esper Control and Bant. I think it would have been Bant Control and then Esper Control would have been my next two matchups. And the way I had Jund Dredge built at the time, and the way that the Esper Controls and Bant Controls were built at the time, they were terrible against Jund Dredge. And I think that I would have easily, and I was beating up those all night long to begin with. So my chances of actually winning those were quite good. Unfortunately, in my top eight, I faced Mono Black Devotion and beat him around game number one. And then game number two, I mulled into Oblivion, lost that game. And game number three, he had the dreaded Mutavault Pack Rat draw. This draw is so obscenely hard to beat with so many decks when they go first turn Thoughtseize, especially, take your removal, and then second turn Mutavault Pack Rat. And that's exactly what happened in this scenario, was he first turn Thoughtseize, took my Golgari Charm, saw that I didn't have any other removal, and went second turn Mutavault Pack Rat. To make things worse, he dropped another Mutavault on turn 3, and now he is just creating the Pack Rat tokens, and they get so incredibly big. On turn number 4, I believe you can activate 2 Mutavaults and swing in for a 4/4 rat, 2 4/4 rats, and another 4 damage with 2 Mutavaults. And that's, turn 4 that can happen. And then he can still, if he has the ultimate prices in Doomblades, you're clearing the board, and you just keep progressing your Pack Rat strategy, activating any excess mana into Mutavaults to make the Pack Rats you have on board bigger. And it's just a doomsday scenario, and I'm so sick of losing. Most of my decks did quite well against Mono Black Devotion, except for this draw. I could handle Desecration Demons, I could handle Grey Merchant, life gain stabilization, I could handle the Doomblade's ultimate prices, etc., etc. What I could not handle is the Mutavault Pack Rat Thoughtseize draw that I lost so many games. And I know that the rest of you have probably lost an obscene amount of games to this combo. So I'm so glad to see Mutavault Pack Rat out of the format. I'm glad to see Mutavault out of the format as well. I think it's just too good for Standard. A deck that can be activated for just one colorless mana into a 2/2, again, just really, really helps the control type decks actually have another type of finisher that is a land that can also progress them into their Sphinx's Revelations and their Supreme Verdicts and yada, yada, yada. So I'm glad to see that card go, even though it did have some flavor as far as it was every creature type, which in this format, if it was in the Khans of Tarkir right now, I think would be very fun to play around with. Now, the number one slot that I'm going to say I'm glad to see go was, I think that when they printed this particular set of cards, they made the hate against one particular color a little bit too powerful. And the cards that I'm going to talk about here are the anti-green cards. So first of all is the Tidebinder Mage. And, yep, it's not going to load it over here. It's the Tidebinder Mage. And then Mr. Lifebane Zombie. So these two cards just made green very, very hard to deal with, as you had a first turn Thoughtseize grab one thing, and then you could have a third turn Lifebane Zombie grab your, like Plukranos. That's why Monsters was unplayable. You couldn't play cards like Plukranos because Lifebane Zombie would just eat it. It would come out the turn before usually. And, any sort of late game green or white was Archangel Thune was taken care of. Geez, even cards like Armada Worm had no chance of ever being playable in the format, when there was something that not only got rid of a white or green creature, but also created 2 Devotion and had Intimidate. I mean, Lifebane Zombie is just too strong of a card for green decks to deal with. Green had basically 0 playability outside of Jund Planeswalkers at the end of the season. People were messing around with Mono Green Devotion lists, but again, Mono Green Devotion was terrible against Thoughtseize and Lifebane Zombie. Another card that kept green down for the first half of the season was Tidebinder Mage. Tidebinder Mage kept red decks as well, but at least Tidebinder Mage could be shocked or something, but the real bane was against green decks. First turn Elvish Mystic happened to get shut down by a second turn Tidebinder Mage. There's no way you could ramp after that. And then they just beat you down. Again, the double Devotion on the Tidebinder Mage was very relevant because it was another card that worked perfectly in the Mono Blue Devotion to then set up the Master of Waves. So you got huge upside on the Tidebinder Mage coming down, tapping down the your green creature. Like what happened to me all the time was Lot the Troll would get tapped down, and then, or like my Nemesis Immortals, or whatever deck I was brewing at the time using green, and then I'd have to find some sort of removal spell to just take care of it. It's just a 2/2, annoying 2/2, and then they'd just get the tempo going, and then Master Waves would come out, or Thos would come out, and that's basically game. So I think that Tidebinder Mage and Lifebane Zombie were very, very negative, because if you compare them to the other ones, if you compare them to like Mindsparker, the red anti-white blue card, or you compare it to especially the green, the Witch Stalker. I mean, they're all pretty good. Like Witch Stalker is pretty good, and I think that they imagined that those cards would do better than they would. But people really just wanted the Witch Stalker for the ability for hexproof. It wasn't really like anti-black or anti-blue card. It would just, the hexproof was anti-everything, and so it was a very well balanced card. It didn't hate out a specific color the way that Lifebane Zombie and Tidebinder Mage did. Mindsparker was, I don't think saw any play. It was just kind of a dead of a card. It didn't do enough compared to Lifebane Zombie and Tidebinder Mage. And the Paladin was pretty decent, the white one that had lifelink, except there were so many ways you could actually kill it, because it didn't have protection from red and black. It just could not be targeted by black or red spells, so you could still Drown in Sorrow it. You could still not Ultimate Price, you could still Anger of Gods it, and there's just a lot of ways to get around the Paladin's ability to hate out the red and the black. So anyway, these are my top 10, or top 5 list of archetypes that I am glad are going away. So again, at the number 5 slot is going to be the not Pack Rat, sorry, it refreshed here. It's going to be the package of just very, very value-based two mana cost removal spells that black had. Then we have the 4 damage red spells, the really, really control-based cards for blue and white, the Pack Rat Mutavault drop, and the Lifebane Zombie Tidebinder anti-green package. So let me know which cards you were glad to see go. I think that this is a very easy top 10 list, or top 5 list to do compared to the other Innistrad one. A lot of people disagreed with my Innistrad picks, but I think that these cards for sure kept Standard stale, and in my opinion, not as fun as it could have been. This is Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.